From the outside looking in, my life was perfect. My name's Tom, and for the past 8 years, I've been married to Emma, a woman I truly believed was my soulmate. We had it all, a comfortable house in a quiet suburb, 2 amazing kids, and the kind of love most people could only dream of. Our mornings were filled with laughter as we got the kids ready for school, Emma making pancakes while I packed lunches. Evenings were quieter, but just as fulfilling. Family dinners, movie nights, and reading bedtime stories to our little ones. Every Sunday, Emma and I would share a bottle of wine after the kids went to bed, sitting on the porch, talking about our dreams and plans. It was our tradition, our connection, a quiet promise we made to each other week after week. Emma wasn't just my wife. She was my best friend. She had a light about her that could brighten even my darkest days. Her smile could lift my spirits when work stressed me out, and her touch was my sanctuary. I never doubted her, not for a second. Ours was the kind of love that felt invincible, built on trust, faith, and years of shared moments that had stitched us together. So when Emma's old friend Megan came back into her life, I didn't think much of it. Megan had moved back to town after a bitter divorce and was looking for a fresh start. Emma was thrilled to reconnect, and honestly, I was happy for her. I figured having a friend to lean on would be good for her. But there was something about Megan that didn't sit right with me. I met her for the first time when Emma invited her over for coffee. Megan was different. She had this energy that felt sharp, almost abrasive, as if she thrived on stirring the pot. She spoke loudly, laughed at her own jokes, and made little jabs that didn't feel like jokes at all. "Oh, Tom, you're such the family man," she had said, smirking as she glanced at the baby monitor on the counter. "Must be so exciting. Don't you miss the fun days?" Her words didn't bother me much then, but the way Emma laughed and agreed, "Yeah, Tom can be a little boring sometimes," lingered with me. I brushed it off, telling myself it was harmless teasing. We all said things in the moment we didn't really mean, right? Over the next few weeks, Megan's presence in our lives grew. She and Emma began meeting up more often, brunches, gym sessions, and late-night calls. It was nice seeing Emma so animated, but something had shifted. She started dressing differently, tighter dresses, higher heels. She started working late, or so she said, and spent more time on her phone, laughing at texts she never shared with me. At first, I ignored the signs. I trusted Emma. I loved her. We had built a life together, one so strong that nothing could break it. Or so I thought. Then one Sunday evening, as we sat on the porch with our wine, I noticed she was distracted. She kept glancing at her phone, her laughter hollow when I cracked a joke. I asked her what was on her mind, and she shook her head, smiling that distant smile she'd worn a lot lately. "Just work stuff," she said, setting her phone face down on the table. Nothing important, but it felt important. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I found myself replaying every interaction in my head, looking for cracks in the foundation of our perfect life. Was I imagining things? Was I overreacting? Emma hadn't given me any real reason to doubt her, but that gnawing feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. And then came the first real clue. A receipt left on the kitchen counter. It was for a bottle of wine, a brand we never bought. It wasn't expensive, but it wasn't cheap either. The strange thing was, the purchase was made at a wine bar across town, one we'd never visited together. I picked up the receipt, turning it over in my hand. When I asked Emma about it, her response was quick and casual. "Oh, that's Megan's. She must have left it here by accident." She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and went back to folding laundry as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something was happening, and for the first time in years, I felt the faintest crack in the trust we had built. Looking back, that moment was the beginning of the end. I just didn't know it yet. If the first crack in my marriage was the receipt, Megan was the wrecking ball swinging directly at its foundation. Her influence over Emma became undeniable. What started as casual catch-ups turned into daily interactions. Emma's phone was practically glued to her hand, the screen lighting up constantly with Megan's name. And Emma? She was changing. The Emma I knew had always been practical, steady, a woman who prioritized our family above everything else. But Megan had pulled her into another world, one that seemed to thrive on chaos. Emma started staying out late. She insisted it was just girls' nights, but her vague answers left me uneasy. Where once she'd share every detail of her day with me, now her stories were sanitized, brief. It was like she was deliberately withholding something. The changes weren't just behavioral. Emma's wardrobe transformed overnight. Out went the comfortable sweaters and jeans she'd always loved. In came slinky dresses, crop tops, and stilettos. I complimented her the first few times. It's what a supportive husband does, right? But as the outfits became bolder, my compliments turned into cautious questions. You look great, but is there a special occasion? She laughed it off. No, Tom. I just felt like spicing things up. Megan says I've been playing it too safe for too long. Megan said this. Megan suggested that. It was like every decision Emma made now had Megan's fingerprints on it. I didn't want to be the controlling husband, so I kept my concerns to myself. Maybe Emma was just going through a phase. Maybe Megan's confidence was rubbing off on her in a positive way. At least, that's what I told myself late at night when I stared at the ceiling, trying to ignore the growing distance between us. But things came to a head one Friday evening. Emma was getting ready for another night out with Megan, carefully applying her makeup in the bathroom mirror. She looked stunning, but there was something unfamiliar about her, something almost calculated, like she was dressing up for someone other than herself. Where are you two headed tonight? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Just a bar downtown. A little wine. Maybe some dancing. She didn't even look at me as she spoke, her attention fixed on perfecting her eyeliner. I hesitated before asking the question that had been gnawing at me for weeks. Emma, do you think Megan's good for you? For us? That got her attention. She set down her eyeliner and turned to face me, her expression defensive. What's that supposed to mean? I mean, ever since she came back into your life, things feel different. You're different. We're different. Emma rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, Tom. Megan's just helping me find myself again. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I said, crossing my arms. I want to understand. She sighed, exasperated. Megan's been through a lot. Okay? Her divorce, starting over. It's given her a new perspective. She's just trying to help me see that there's more to life than being a mom and a wife. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. More to life than being a mom and a wife? Is that how you see it? Don't twist my words, she snapped. I love being a mom and your wife, but I can't just lose myself in that. Megan says it's important to explore who I am outside of all this. Megan says, I echoed bitterly. What about what I say? Or what we say together? Emma looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. You just don't get it, Tom. That conversation set the tone for the weeks that followed. Emma and I were speaking different languages, living in different worlds. She was out more than she was home, her excuses growing thinner each time. It's for work or Megan needed me became the standard lines. I didn't believe them, but I didn't confront her either. I told myself I was giving her space, being patient. In reality, I was scared. Scared of what I might find if I pushed too hard. Then came the night I couldn't ignore. I just tucked the kids into bed when I noticed Emma's phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. Megan's name flashed across the screen, followed by a text preview that made my stomach drop. Tom still buying the work excuse? You're a natural at this. Can't wait for tomorrow night. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that. But how could I not? The words were like a neon sign, screaming at me, daring me to confront the truth. When Emma came home that night, I was waiting. She looked surprised to see me still up, her face flushed, her makeup slightly smudged. Late night, I said evenly, watching her kick off her heels. Yeah, Megan and I lost track of time, she said, her tone casual. Too casual. I nodded, holding up her phone. Then maybe you can explain this. Her face went pale as she saw the screen, the damning text still displayed. For a moment, she was silent, her mind clearly racing. Then she snatched the phone from my hand, her expression hardening. That's private, she said defensively. Not anymore, I replied. Who are you, Emma? Because I don't recognize the woman standing in front of me. Instead of apologizing, instead of explaining, Emma shrugged. Maybe that's the problem, Tom. Maybe it's time you got to know the real me. And with that, the perfect marriage I thought I had was gone. Or maybe it had never existed at all. The Emma I knew had always been practical, steady, a woman who prioritized our family above everything else. But Megan had pulled her into another world, one that seemed to thrive on chaos. Emma started staying out late. She insisted it was just girls' nights, but her vague answers left me uneasy. Where once she'd share every detail of her day with me, now her stories were sanitized, brief. It was like she was deliberately withholding something. The changes weren't just behavioral. Emma's wardrobe transformed overnight. Out went the comfortable sweaters and jeans she'd always loved. In came slinky dresses, crop tops, and stilettos. I complimented her the first few times. It's what a supportive husband does, right? But as the outfits became bolder, my compliments turned into cautious questions. You look great, but is there a special occasion? She laughed it off. No, Tom. I just felt like spicing things up. Megan says I've been playing it too safe for too long. Megan said this. Megan suggested that. It was like every decision Emma made now had Megan's fingerprints on it. I didn't want to be the controlling husband, so I kept my concerns to myself. Maybe Emma was just going through a phase. Maybe Megan's confidence was rubbing off on her in a positive way. At least, that's what I told myself late at night when I stared at the ceiling, trying to ignore the growing distance between us. But things came to a head one Friday evening. Emma was getting ready for another night out with Megan, carefully applying her makeup in the bathroom mirror. She looked stunning, but there was something unfamiliar about her, something almost calculated, like she was dressing up for someone other than herself. Where are you two headed tonight? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Just a bar downtown. A little wine. Maybe some dancing. She didn't even look at me as she spoke, her attention fixed on perfecting her eyeliner. I hesitated before asking the question that had been gnawing at me for weeks. Emma, do you think Megan's good for you? For us? That got her attention. She set down her eyeliner and turned to face me, her expression defensive. What's that supposed to mean? I mean, ever since she came back into your life, things feel different. You're different. We're different. Emma rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, Tom. Megan's just helping me find myself again. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I said, crossing my arms. I want to understand. She sighed, exasperated. Megan's been through a lot. Okay? Her divorce, starting over. It's given her a new perspective. She's just trying to help me see that there's more to life than being a mom and a wife. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. More to life than being a mom and a wife? Is that how you see it? Don't twist my words, she snapped. I love being a mom and your wife, but I can't just lose myself in that. Megan says it's important to explore who I am outside of all this. Megan says, I echoed bitterly. What about what I say? Or what we say together? Emma looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. You just don't get it, Tom. That conversation set the tone for the weeks that followed. Emma and I were speaking different languages, living in different worlds. She was out more than she was home, her excuses growing thinner each time. It's for work or Megan needed me became the standard lines. I didn't believe them, but I didn't confront her either. I told myself I was giving her space, being patient. In reality, I was scared. Scared of what I might find if I pushed too hard. Then came the night I couldn't ignore. I just tucked the kids into bed when I noticed Emma's phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. Megan's name flashed across the screen, followed by a text preview that made my stomach drop. Tom still buying the work excuse? You're a natural at this. Can't wait for tomorrow night. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that. But how could I not? The words were like a neon sign, screaming at me, daring me to confront the truth. When Emma came home that night, I was waiting. She looked surprised to see me still up, her face flushed, her makeup slightly smudged. Late night, I said evenly, watching her kick off her heels. Yeah, Megan and I lost track of time, she said, her tone casual. Too casual. I nodded, holding up her phone. Then maybe you can explain this. Her face went pale as she saw the screen, the damning text still displayed. For a moment, she was silent, her mind clearly racing. Then she snatched the phone from my hand, her expression hardening. That's private, she said defensively. Not anymore, I replied. Who are you, Emma? Because I don't recognize the woman standing in front of me. Instead of apologizing, instead of explaining, Emma shrugged. Maybe that's the problem, Tom. Maybe it's time you got to know the real me. And with that, the perfect marriage I thought I had was gone. Or maybe it had never existed at all. It's strange how life can shatter in an instant, how one moment can erase years of trust. That night, as Emma stood in front of me, unapologetic and cold, I realized the woman I'd married was no longer the person I thought I knew. Or maybe, worse, she had never been. What does that even mean, Emma? The real me? What aren't you telling me? I demanded, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Emma sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. It means I've spent years trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect mom, and somewhere along the way, I forgot who I was. Megan's helped me see that. See what? That our marriage doesn't matter? That I don't matter. My voice cracked with the weight of the betrayal clawing at my chest. You're twisting this into something it's not, Tom, she said, her tone sharp. This isn't about you. It's about me. Her words were like a dagger. For so long, we'd been a team, Emma and Tom, two halves of the same whole. And now she was telling me she wanted something else, something I wasn't a part of. Who is he? I asked bluntly, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. Emma's eyes flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. Don't lie to me, Emma. I saw the text. Who are you meeting tomorrow night? Her silence was deafening. She crossed her arms, her gaze steady, but the defiance in her eyes couldn't hide the guilt beneath. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. It's not what you think. Then tell me, I demanded. Make me understand. Emma hesitated before finally muttering. His name is Mark. He's someone Megan introduced me to. We've had coffee a few times, that's all. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Coffee? That's all? Then why lie about it? Why sneak around? I didn't lie, she shot back, her voice rising now. I just didn't tell you because I knew you'd overreact. Like you're doing right now. Overreact? You're meeting another man behind my back, and I'm supposed to what, be okay with it? Applaud your self-discovery? The sarcasm in my voice was razor-sharp, but I couldn't stop myself. I was angry, hurt, betrayed. Emma's face hardened, her jaw tightening. This isn't cheating, Tom. It's exploring, Megan said. Of course Megan said. I interrupted. Megan, the woman who wrecked her own marriage and decided to drag you down with her. When did you start letting her run our lives? She's not running my life, Emma snapped. She's helping me see what I want. And what I want is freedom. Freedom to figure out who I am. And what about me? What about us? I asked, my voice quieter now, desperate. What about our kids? Emma looked away, her silence speaking volumes. It was clear that in her quest for freedom, she hadn't thought about the consequences. Not for me, not for our family. Or maybe she had, and she just didn't care. That night, Emma slept in the guest room. I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and pain. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, had chosen someone else, something else, over me. I replayed every moment of our marriage, searching for the cracks I must have missed. Had I been too boring? Too predictable? Was I the reason she drifted away? The next day, Emma acted like nothing had happened. She kissed the kids goodbye, dressed in a sleek black dress that hugged her in ways that made my heart ache, and left the house without a word to me. I sat at the kitchen table, gripping my coffee mug so tightly my knuckles turned white, trying to make sense of what was happening to my life. I couldn't just sit there. I needed answers. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed her. I stayed a few cars back as she drove downtown, pulling into the parking lot of a trendy cafe I'd never seen before. I parked across the street, my heart pounding as I watched her step out of the car and smooth her dress. She looked radiant, beautiful, confident. It killed me to know she wasn't dressing like that for me. A man approached her, a tall, well-dressed guy with a charming smile. He greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, his hand lingering on her waist. My stomach churned as I watched them walk inside together, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I stayed in the car, my mind racing. I wanted to storm in there, confront them, demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started snapping pictures. If Emma wanted freedom, if she wanted to tear our family apart, then I would make sure she faced the consequences. That evening, when she came home, I confronted her again. This time, I didn't hold back. I showed her the photos, laid out everything I knew. She didn't deny it, didn't apologize. Instead, she doubled down. "I'm not ashamed of what I'm doing, Tom," she said, her voice calm, almost cold. "I'm tired of living for everyone else. I need this." Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. In that moment, I realized our marriage was no longer a partnership. It was a battlefield, and I was done playing nice. If Emma wanted war, I was ready to give it to her. Emma's words echoed in my head long after she'd gone upstairs, her calm, unapologetic demeanor like salt in an open wound. "I'm not ashamed of what I'm doing." I couldn't believe the woman I'd built my life with, the mother of my children, could be so cold. But her shamelessness gave me clarity. She wasn't going to stop, and I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I needed a plan. I spent that night sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the pictures I'd taken of her and Mark. The laughter on her face, the way his hand had lingered on her waist. It was all there, in black and white. Proof of her betrayal. It wasn't just about me anymore. I had 2 kids to think about, 2 innocent lives who deserved better than this. The first step was to gather evidence. If Emma wanted freedom, I'd make sure she had it, but not before securing everything that mattered. My kids, my assets, and my dignity. Using my laptop, I began researching private investigators. I needed someone discreet, someone who wouldn't just get the job done but would do it thoroughly. By the time the sun rose, I had a short list of candidates. I made the call later that morning while Emma was out with Megan. The investigator's name was James Porter, a retired cop who now specialized in uncovering infidelity. His voice was calm and professional as I explained the situation, though I could hear a faint edge of pity. "You've already got a good start with the photos," James said after I emailed him what I had. "But if you want a solid case, especially for custody, you'll need more. Texts, emails, recordings, and ideally, video evidence. Can you handle that?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "That's what I do," he replied. "But I'll need access to her phone. Can you make that happen?" It felt wrong, invasive even, but what choice did I have? Emma had already shattered my trust. "I'll figure something out," I said. When Emma came home that evening, I was ready. I kept my tone casual, acting like I was trying to move past the tension. Over dinner, I asked about her day, about Megan, even complimenting her dress. She seemed suspicious at first, but the act worked. By the end of the night, she was laughing again, her guard down. Later, as she slept, I retrieved her phone from the nightstand. My hands trembled as I installed the tracking app James had recommended, the one that would sync her messages, call logs, and location to a secure account. Every step felt like crossing a line, but I reminded myself why I was doing this. For the kids, for the truth. The next week was a blur of carefully orchestrated surveillance. While Emma continued her double life, I acted the part of the oblivious husband. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings, helped the kids with their homework, and even went to church with her on Sunday, sitting in the same pew as always. But beneath the surface, I was unraveling. The data from the tracker poured in, each message and call a fresh wound. Emma and Mark weren't just meeting for coffee. They were meeting at hotels, coordinating their rendezvous like it was a business transaction. And it wasn't just Mark. There were messages from other men, too. Flirty texts and late-night calls that painted a picture I didn't want to see. Emma's freedom wasn't just about self-discovery. It was a complete abandonment of everything we'd built together. James worked quickly, compiling the evidence into a damning dossier. There were photos of Emma entering and leaving hotels, time-stamped text exchanges detailing their plans, even audio recordings of phone calls. Each piece of evidence was like a dagger to the heart, but it was also fuel. I wasn't just going to confront Emma. I was going to destroy the fantasy she was living in. But as the evidence piled up, so did my rage. It wasn't just Emma who had betrayed me. Megan had played a central role in all of this. She'd planted the seeds of doubt in Emma's mind, encouraged her to stray, and introduced her to Mark. I couldn't shake the feeling that Megan's meddling wasn't just about helping Emma find herself. There was something else, something personal. I needed to find out what. One evening, while Emma was out, I went through her emails and found an exchange between her and Megan that made my blood run cold. Megan had written, "Tom's so predictable. He'll never see it coming. Just stick to the plan, and you'll get everything you want. Trust me." The plan. What plan? The email didn't say, but it confirmed what I'd suspected all along. This wasn't just Emma's doing. Megan had orchestrated it, and I was the target. By the time Emma came home that night, I was calm. Too calm. She kissed me on the cheek, her perfume still fresh, and asked how my day had been. I smiled, the mask firmly in place. "It was good," I said. "Productive." As she went upstairs, I stayed in the living room, staring at the evidence spread across my laptop screen. My plan was almost complete. Emma and Megan thought they had the upper hand, but they didn't realize they were playing a game I was about to win. They wanted freedom? I'd give it to them, but not without consequences. Emma might not be ashamed of what she'd done, but she would be. Soon. The moment I uncovered the email between Emma and Megan, the pieces began to fall into place. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a setup. Megan's influence, the calculated way Emma had shifted from a loving wife to someone I barely recognized, and the cryptic reference to a plan all pointed to something far more sinister. But it wasn't until James called me 2 days later that the full picture came into focus. "Tom," he said, his voice cautious, "I found something you're going to want to see." "What is it?" I asked, my heart pounding. I dug deeper into Megan's background, as you requested. It turns out she's been divorced twice, not once like Emma claimed. And both divorces left her ex-husbands in financial ruin. She didn't just walk away with alimony. She went after their savings, their homes, even their businesses. I gripped the phone tighter. What does this have to do with me? Her second ex-husband mentioned something interesting during their divorce proceedings. James continued. He claimed Megan has a pattern. She befriends women in stable marriages, encourages them to explore their freedom, and then helps orchestrate messy divorces that leave the husbands gutted. Both her exes believe she profits from the fallout, though it's unclear how. The air left my lungs. "Are you saying Megan is targeting me?" "It's starting to look that way," James said. Her closeness to Emma, the sudden changes in her behavior, even the men Emma's involved with. None of this feels random. Megan may be playing a long game. I hung up, my mind racing. Megan wasn't just a toxic influence. She was a predator. And she'd sunk her claws into my wife, using Emma as a pawn in her twisted scheme. But what was her endgame? Was it revenge? Money? Or simply the thrill of destruction? That night, I confronted Emma, but I didn't go in guns blazing. I needed answers, and blowing up on her wouldn't get me anywhere. Instead, I waited until the kids were asleep and found her in the living room, scrolling through her phone. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my tone steady. She glanced up, annoyed. "Can it wait? I'm tired." "No," I said firmly. "It can't." Emma sighed, setting her phone down. "What now, Tom?" "Another lecture about how I've ruined your perfect little life." "I know about Megan," I said, watching her carefully. "I know what she's done to other marriages. And I know she's doing the same thing to us." Her eyes widened, just for a moment, before narrowing into a glare. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I?" I pulled up the email from Megan and handed her my phone. "Explain this." Emma read the email, her face pale. But instead of guilt, there was anger. "You went through my emails? That's a violation of my privacy." "And what about my life, Emma? My marriage? Was Megan's plan to violate that too?" My voice was rising now, but I didn't care. "You've been manipulated, Emma. Can't you see that?" Emma stood, crossing her arms. "Megan's not manipulating me. She's helping me see the truth. The truth about us, about how suffocating this life is." "Suffocating?" I repeated, stunned. "We built this life together. You didn't seem suffocated when we were raising our kids or planning our future." "That's because I didn't know what I was missing," she snapped. "Megan showed me there's more to life than playing house. No, I said, stepping closer. What Megan showed you is how to destroy a family. And if you keep following her, that's exactly what you'll do. For a moment, Emma faltered. I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, a crack in the armor Megan had wrapped around her. But then her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it like it was a lifeline. Is that Megan? I asked, my voice dripping with disdain. What pearls of wisdom is she offering now? Emma snatched up the phone, holding it close to her chest. I don't have to listen to this, she said, storming toward the stairs. But before she could leave, I dropped the bombshell. I hired a private investigator. She froze on the stairs, her back to me. What? I know about Mark. I know about the hotels. I know about the other men, I said, my voice cold. I have everything, Emma. Photos, texts, recordings. And I know Megan's behind it all. She turned slowly, her face a mix of shock and fury. You spied on me? You gave me no choice, I said. You're tearing this family apart, and you don't even realize you're being used. Emma didn't respond. She just stared at me, her expression unreadable, before finally retreating upstairs without another word. The next day, I made a call to Megan. She didn't answer, so I left a message, my voice calm but firm. Megan, this is Tom. We need to talk. I know what you're doing, and I'm not going to let it happen. Stay away from my wife, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. Later that evening, Emma came downstairs, her face pale. She didn't say anything, just handed me her phone. The screen displayed a message from Megan. He knows. Abort the plan. You're on your own. Emma's hands trembled as she looked at me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in weeks, fear. For the first time, she realized the gravity of what she'd done. But it wasn't pity or reconciliation I felt in that moment. It was satisfaction. The game wasn't over, but the tide had turned, and I was ready to finish it. Emma's fear didn't shake me. If anything, it strengthened my resolve. Her alliance with Megan had been exposed, and the evidence I'd gathered was enough to shatter the illusion she had built around her so-called freedom. Now, it was time to make her face the consequences of her choices. The morning after Emma handed me her phone, she avoided me completely. I didn't push her. I didn't need to. The silence between us was heavy, filled with the weight of what was coming. She knew it, and I knew it. This wasn't just about trust anymore. It was about accountability. I spent the day finalizing my plan with James and my lawyer, Carol Vance, a no-nonsense professional with a reputation for winning high-stakes cases. I showed Carol everything, the photos, the messages, and Megan's incriminating email. She flipped through the files methodically, her lips pressed into a thin line. This is airtight, she said, finally looking up. With this evidence, you'll have no trouble securing custody of your kids and protecting your assets. The court doesn't take kindly to infidelity, especially when it's this blatant. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and determination. What about Megan? Can we do anything about her? Carol smirked. That's a trickier situation. But if she's been orchestrating these affairs to profit from divorces, we might have grounds for legal action. Let me do some digging. By the time I returned home, the kids were asleep, and Emma was sitting on the couch, staring at the TV. Except the screen was blank. She was waiting for me. Tom, she said softly as I walked in, her voice trembling. We need to talk. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorway. Go ahead. She hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. I'm sorry. For everything. For Mark. For Megan. For lying to you. I don't know what I was thinking. Neither do I said, my tone flat. But it's too late for apologies, Emma. Her eyes filled with tears. Don't say that. We can fix this. I'll cut ties with Megan, I swear. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Make it right, I said, my voice rising. You've been lying to me for months. You've dragged our marriage, our family, through the mud. And now that Megan's abandoned you, you suddenly want to fix it? She flinched, tears streaming down her face. I was stupid. I let her get into my head. But I love you, Tom. I never stopped loving you. I laughed bitterly. You have a funny way of showing it. Emma reached for me, but I stepped back, out of her reach. It's over, Emma. I said coldly. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce. Her face crumpled, and she dropped to her knees, sobbing. Please, Tom, don't do this. Think about the kids. I am thinking about the kids, I said sharply. And they deserve better than this. Better than a mother who puts her selfish desires above her family. She cried harder, but I didn't falter. For months, I'd been the one begging for answers, for honesty. Now it was her turn to feel the sting of rejection. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I filed for divorce, and Carol moved quickly to secure a temporary custody arrangement that kept the kids with me. Emma was allowed supervised visitation, but her actions had left her with little leverage in court. Meanwhile, James had uncovered more about Megan's schemes. She'd orchestrated similar betrayals in 3 other marriages, each time profiting indirectly by brokering financial settlements for the women involved. Carol was ecstatic, calling it the smoking gun. We needed to pursue legal action against her. Emma's betrayal had shattered our marriage, but Megan's manipulation was the spark that set everything ablaze. I wasn't content to let her walk away unscathed. A few days before our first court hearing, I confronted Megan directly. She was at a cafe, sipping on some overpriced latte, when I walked up to her table. Her eyes widened as she saw me, but she quickly recovered, flashing a smug smile. Tom, she said, feigning surprise. What a pleasant surprise. Cut the act, I said, sitting across from her. I know what you've been doing. Her smile faltered. I don't know what you're talking about. I leaned in, my voice low and menacing. I have emails, text messages, and testimony from your ex-husbands. You've made a career out of destroying marriages, Megan. But this time you've met your match. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. You can't prove anything, can I? I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were copies of the evidence James had collected, along with legal documents Carol had prepared. This is going to court. And when it does, your little empire of lies is going to crumble. Megan's face drained of color as she flipped through the papers. You wouldn't. Watch me, I said, standing. Enjoy your latte, Megan. It might be the last luxury you can afford for a while. By the time the court hearing arrived, I was ready. Emma's tears and apologies didn't sway the judge. Not against the mountain of evidence I presented. I was granted full custody of the kids, control of our home, and a significant portion of our shared assets. Megan, meanwhile, was hit with a lawsuit for her involvement, and her reputation in the community was left in tatters. Emma moved out the next day, leaving behind a house filled with memories she no longer had a place in. As I stood in the empty living room, watching the movers carry out the last of her things, I felt a strange sense of peace. The war was over, and I had one. Life has a way of rebuilding itself, even from the ashes of betrayal. In the months following the court hearing, my focus shifted from anger to healing. The house, once a stage for heartbreak, became a sanctuary again, a safe haven for me and the kids. They were my anchor, my reason to keep moving forward. Emma's absence was a strange relief. Her departure left a void, but it was one filled with possibility rather than despair. For the first time in months, I could breathe without the weight of suspicion or mistrust. I could finally be the father my kids needed without the shadow of betrayal looming over me. Emma, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. The court's decision left her with limited visitation rights and a shattered reputation. Megan had abandoned her entirely, their so-called friendship dissolving the moment the lawsuits hit. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Emma was staying in a cramped apartment on the other side of town, trying to pick up the pieces of her life. Part of me pitied her, but I knew better than to dwell on it. She'd made her choices. Now, she was living with them. Megan, predictably, tried to fight back. She filed a counterclaim, accusing me of harassment, but the mountain of evidence against her was insurmountable. The courts ruled in my favor, and she was forced to pay damages, not enough to ruin her financially, but enough to make a statement. Her reputation as a manipulative saboteur spread quickly, and her social circle evaporated almost overnight. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when my life took an unexpected turn. I was at the park with the kids, pushing my youngest on the swings, when I noticed a woman sitting on a nearby bench. She was reading a book, a soft smile playing on her lips as she glanced up every now and then to watch the children playing. Her name was Claire, as I'd later learn. She had a warmth about her that felt both unfamiliar and comforting, a quiet confidence that drew me in. Our first conversation was simple, casual, just two parents sharing small talk. But there was something about the way she listened, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about her own son, that stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, our paths crossed more often. Claire and I began to meet intentionally, finding excuses to spend time together. Coffee dates, walks in the park, even a spontaneous movie night. She was everything Emma wasn't. Honest, grounded, and kind in a way that felt effortless. For the first time in what felt like forever, I began to hope again. Emma found out about Claire through the kids, who innocently mentioned her during a phone call. She showed up at my door a week later, unannounced and desperate. Her once polished appearance was gone, replaced by a tired, worn-out version of herself. "Tom," she began, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms, leaning against the door frame. "What do you want, Emma?" I need to tell you how sorry I am," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've ruined everything. But I can't stop thinking about us, about what we had. What we had is gone," I said firmly. "You made sure of that." "I know," she whispered, wiping at her tears. "But I'm trying to be better. For the kids. For myself. I miss you, Tom." Her words might have broken me months ago, but now they barely registered. I felt no anger, no sadness, only indifference. "I hope you do better, Emma, for your sake and theirs. But as for us, there's nothing left." Her shoulders slumped as she nodded, the weight of finality sinking in. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her figure retreating into the fading evening light. Claire and I continued to grow closer. She understood the wounds I carried without pressing me to heal faster than I was ready. Her kindness extended to my kids, who adored her almost immediately. Over time, what began as friendship blossomed into something deeper, something real. The first time I introduced her as my partner, the kids cheered. It was a simple moment, but it felt monumental, a new beginning for all of us. One year after Emma left, I stood in the backyard with Claire and the kids, watching as they laughed and played. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the yard, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. Emma's betrayal had been devastating, but it hadn't defined me. I had rebuilt my life, stronger and better than before. And as I stood there, holding Claire's hand, I realized something profound. Sometimes, life has to break you to show you how strong you really are. The war was over, and not only had I survived, I had won.